Welcome to episode 1 of the Ball Over Passion podcast. I'm here with George, PrivarsenalZ, PLCKK, and our guest today, A1. A1, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, just A1, and my at's like on the label on the screen. So yeah, happy to be here. How you guys doing?
All good, mate. So the topic today is going to be about the background staff and the changes that have gone on at the club. We're going to go quite deep into this, and really excited to see what you guys have to say, and hopefully we can bring some knowledge to the people. So let's get straight into it then. Let's just start with when we look at Arsenal right now, how the pyramid of the club, how are we looking at how exactly do we like how it is? What's the general structure of the club, just so people, if they don't know, if anyone wants to jump in?
Yeah, so mainly what we're seeing right now is, I think we're seeing some growing pains about many of the ideas of the pillars that we see with football and how we want to organize who heads what. And there is a little bit of a power vacuum if you look since 2018 about who's been in charge, whether that's Raul, whether that's the owners. And I think what we're moving towards is a much more streamlined approach, where we're going to be seeing specific roles for specific people. And what you're going to have long term is you can remove specific people, but the structure will remain the same. So if we're talking about, for example, youth development, much of the philosophy will stay the same, but those people can be removed and you don't have a lack of structure moving forward. That's just my broad overview of what I think in terms of the different fundamentals. But the specific people, there's been an overturn, absolutely. But I am very encouraged about who and the process for hiring, mainly with the idea of Nolan Partners, which I'm not too sure if people know, but Nolan Partners were involved in helping us to recruit Marcel Lucassen, who I'm a huge fan of, and we'll get into the youth development. But the process of actually hiring a law firm to do so is not as flippant as what's made out in Twitter. It's actually been used by many teams, including Liverpool with FSG. So I'm really quite encouraged from the how aspect of how we're getting these people. Whether those specific people perform is a different category, but I think you need to look at the process of how you attain those people first and critique it.
I mean, for me, I think that the general perception of our structure, there's very much an emphasis on the likes of Edu, on the likes of Raul to go before him. But right now, there's a lot of doubt and a lot of concern. But I think it's something that's very hard to get the dynamics right and to understand where the power is at the club right now. And as you said, there's a vacuum right now. If anyone else wants to have jump in on that, or
Go.
No, I just wanted to say the names of the big three at the top right now. It's probably Edu, who's the technical director. He joined us in July 2019. We have Richard Garlick, who's joining us at the end of this season. He's the director of football operations, and Vinay, who's the CEO of Arsenal right now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. A1, I think you were going to say something as well.
No, I'm just saying, like, there's been a lot of transition over these last, I'd say, 18 months to 2 years, where there's people coming in, people coming out. Even where George was talking about Marcel Lucassen, like, he was part of the youth development. I think he came in 2018.
2018, yeah.
Yeah, 2018, and I think he's either gone.
He left for personal reasons.
Yeah, for personal reasons. So right now it's just Per Mertesacker
and Luke Hobbs. Yeah.
And they're basically right now in charge of youth development from the academy to the first team, how their pathways and stuff. And I'm liking the way where we're loaning out more players. So we're loaning out more players to different clubs, like you've seen. What's his name? Matt Smith from, I forgot his name. This guy. Yeah. So yeah, we're doing more of that stuff because I'm looking at the Chelsea model, for example. Now it's not sustainable because they sent like 40 players out on loan every year when I think they had Michael Emenalo and all these people over there. So like I'm liking the way we're developing our players now, if that makes sense. And obviously at the top you have Edu, who we know what he does. He's obviously in charge of the football operations and stuff. And I think we've obviously got the Richard Garlick, who's going to be, I think he's taking over Hasfami, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump on quickly because it seems like this is the time to talk about Richard Garlick a little bit. So at Arsenal, he's going to be responsible for the football operations and the first team to the academy that talks about really contract management and relationships with kind of the football governing bodies. He'll take the role, and he's actually come a little bit early. But what his background is he's a qualified solicitor in sports law, and he's worked in a number of law firms, and he's actually had 8 years of experience at West Brom as a director of football, and he was the previous director at the Premier League since 2018. That is what he's coming from. So when you're looking at people and the background of who we are recruiting for a contract law, he is an A1 candidate that, once again, it shows planning. It shows an expertise at targeting the right man for the job with Premier League experience. So these are the things that I look for when I'm talking about. It's not just replacing Hasfami, it's how are we replacing Hasfami. We're not just taking somebody who was primarily responsible for cycling, if I remember correctly. So this process of how is very different. I'm sure we'll get into the youth development side, but I'm glad you brought up the loan aspect of Michael Emenalo, because one of the changes in our background staff is hiring a specific loan manager, Ben Naper, and he has been specifically responsible for changing how we even do loans. So right now, we make teams make presentations to us why that their team is suitable for our players. And we see this change evident in Saliba's loan at Nice. How would he have fit in? What was the philosophy? And he's excelled. We see this in Daniel Ballard and how successful his loan has been, and also Joe and how he's done at Newcastle. The idea that these teams were interviewing like a job for our youngsters, and the process is very good. This is, I think, the fundamental change when we look back at previous loans, when before there was more of a scattergun approach in terms of who got the loan and why. Now we have a specific person in charge and a specific person directing the flow, which for me is what is the most biggest positive, really.
I mean, for me, what I would like to ask is someone, because I'm quite green on this side of football. And when I think of a pyramid, or I think of a structure of a club, I think of Man City. I think of Chixi, or however you see his name. And I think of Sheikh Mansour and how they organize their club. I mean, how would you compare the two organizations, and where do you think they have that we don't, and we don't have that they don't?
Fundamentally, I think right now there is a power vacuum. That's the only critique I would have. I'm seeing the expertise of the personnel. I just don't know fundamentally who is in charge of what. And so that's going to become very important, where I hope we get a CEO type role outlined, where I see Vinay as more of an adjunct in the business side, but he should not be the one maybe making decisions in that aspect. And I don't think he is, to be fair. I think it's just the way it's been portrayed because he's been given the CEO title. But I really would hope that we give somebody, maybe Richard Garlick. I don't know what the title will be, but the idea is we have one person in charge of the governing bodies, which is Richard, and contracts. We have one person in charge of communicating with Mikel and the first team to that boardroom, which is going to be Edu. And then you have Mikel leading what he believes is a profile ID. I see that as a very plausible structure. But you need to, I think, define it into a tree for fans to understand. I think that is clear.
Yes. I think it's not only just for fans to understand, but they need the one thing I would say is, when you talk about a power vacuum, I think what I think of is the lack of defined, clear roles, which has been the case transitioning through the times we had over the past 5 years. There's been a lack of clarity about what certain people do. Like, for example, I mean, I don't like to go on these things, but the idea about Vinay being at the ESL head, sort of, and his role within that. And from what I'm hearing from George now is, should I be afraid of an Ed Woodward like situation where someone who is on the business side be taking over footballing duties?
Z, why don't you go ahead? I think you.
Yeah, I definitely think we won't be seeing that, and that's just because of last summer after Raul Sangheli left the club, the club decided to appoint Mikel Arteta as manager and Edu as Mikel's assistant. Whatever way we want to look at it, Edu is essentially Mikel's assistant, and so Mikel and Edu will sit together and they will line up all the transfer targets. They'll present it to the board, they'll present it to the owners, and they will decide, who to go for. And so that's how the current structure is. Now you're saying that there's been issues with the structure. There's been issues where there's not a role that's been defined for anyone, and that's mainly down to the recruit. The recruitment's been bad. Since Wenger was here, we had Dick Claw, and Dick Claw was known for messing up deals, even when they were 99% done. And after that was noted, Ivan Gazidis then hired a contract specialist in Raul Sangheli, but he also hired someone in Sven Mislintat, and when we looked into it, those two individuals, they had a massive conflict of interest there. So it wasn't working, and someone had to take the boot. And who took the boot was, ultimately was Sven Mislintat. And then we saw Raul go ahead with his sort of plans with signings of Nicolas Pepe, Kieran Tierney, and Danny Ceballos. And I would say almost every deal that was done by Raul Sangheli had a dodgy aspect to it. And that was very quickly sussed out by Tim Lewis that came in last year, and now we're finally starting to see the contract taking a huge grasp of who should be in the hierarchy, who should be in that pyramid, as you say, and that starts with Mikel and Edu. They are the ones that are going to be running strings for the entire club. There has been some discussions where we're saying Edu might be leaving. That is still the case. Edu might be leaving in the next 6 months or in the next 12 months. It just depends on when and where they decide is the right time, and that's where Per is going to come in to take over that role. But like George said, the structure is now there, and we just need the right people to ensure that that cycle keeps on going without fail.
The only really quick adjunct that I want to add on to this is Tim Lewis is an example of the owners taking charge. This is an example of the owners taking an invested interest into the club and hiring somebody who is a fan, but also somebody with the expertise to evaluate objectively the structure. So these are one of the positive indicators that I look at to see how are we going to be doing in the future. Because like I said, you can have bad hires, and Raul was one. But on paper, he was somebody that you would believe would have contacts in a Rolodex that you could see it make sense. But again, it was just a bad hire, and how he went about his business was poor. But we wouldn't know that without somebody making an evaluation of his deals. And that was directly from the Kroenkes. So when I talk about them taking charge, I see that as an active attempt to get into the inside of Arsenal and to actually affect change. So we've got somebody now overseeing the business and is actually a shuttler to the owners, where Edu is supposed to be a shuttler to the coach. Now, if you take out Edu or you take out somebody, that's fine. It shouldn't affect the structure because they are relaying the heads of the department. And that's what I love to see. And it's going to be a board decision.
I mean, speaking of, in this past season, we've seen Mikel being transitioned from a manager to a first team coach, and people getting People
The
not
other way
understanding what that. Sorry, the other way around. Sorry.
The other way around.
But from but the problem is that there's been a lot of misconception about the two roles. I was wondering if anyone has any input on that and what these two roles mean and why the transition has occurred.
So what I've gathered and what I've been told is very quickly. This was from feedback from Unai Emery and feedback from the summer, where all the transfer targets were lined up. They found out that they had the lack of control for the signings. Ideally, what Mikel is looking is to sign players for the system, and Raul had already had plans lined up for players that did not fit the system completely for Arteta, and the fact of the matter is, Mikel was like, "No, I need that full control of the transfers." Maybe it was too early for Mikel, and we could possibly argue that, but the fact is that they've gone back to the old roots, where the manager decides what players he needs for the club, and the assistant goes away and gets those players for him. So that's essentially why it's happened. I don't know if you guys disagree with that decision. Should it have happened or not?
So broadly speaking, when we look at should a head coach be given recruitment responsibilities or should it be separate, that's a debate that can be had. I think what we've done is we've actually secured the long-term future of both in how we look at the structure. Mainly with youth development, we can see how that can be sustainable long-term. When you have somebody like Mikel, who I believe is a generational coach, I really believe in his ability as a coach, that is when I tend to agree that you should recruit to that coach's responsibilities. That can become messy when that coach is not good at their job or when you feel that they're not adequate. It can leave you in a vacuum like Man United. So you actually do have two examples here, Arsenal and Man United, of the worst of both scenarios. You have a coach or revolving coaches that have recruited to revolving personalities that have let a team stagnate, or you have a Dortmund model where they do look at specific profiles and they recruit to that for a coach or a philosophy. There's pros and cons to both. In my opinion, fundamentally, you have a structure that can do something where you recruit towards an Arsenal way of playing. But if you have a coach that's good enough, I feel you give him control to realize his potential.
I mean, if we look, because the thing is, if you look at his staff and you look at how he's structured his coaching staff, are there comments that you would have on the specific personnel he's brought in, or is it very much more of the same? I mean, how would you?
So it's very different, and this is, again, one of the indicators that I'm trying to say, where I look for things that tell me, is there a long-term plan? With Mikel on his background staff, I think I'll let Chris get into maybe some of the specifics of maybe the more well-known ones, but the biggest things that I wanted to address really was the set-piece coach that we had recruited in the summer and how we recruited Inaki Kana. So Andreas Georgeson was our set-piece coach. It was our second hire from Brentford, following the highly regarded goalkeeping Inaki Kana appointment, which would help alleviate our goalkeeping kind of landscape to another level. And I think we've seen the work that Kana has done mainly for Leno and in our goalkeeping. But when we look at Georgeson, I just wanted to tell you a couple stats here. So in 2016 and 2017, we conceded 6 goals due to set pieces. The following season, we conceded 7. The following season after that, 8. And the year before, so 2019 and 2020, we conceded 14 goals to set pieces.
It was pretty bad. It
was horrible. Now, when we look after that hire and to this season, Arsenal have allowed their opponents just 15 shots on target against them from set pieces, which is the fewest in the top flight. And Arsenal have conceded just 17% of their goals from set plays, which again is the lowest proportion in the top flight. So you're looking there now at direct outcome from a hire. Okay, so this is what I talk about when I'm looking at is the idea correct? Amazing. You're recruiting from a modern club in Brentford who have done this for years. I love that. Is the coach good at his job? evidently by stats, he has outputted consistently. We have improved in that, just as I've said. So now you're pairing good hires with good process. And that is what I look for in a long-term sustainable plan. And Chris, I think you had some extras on that.
Yeah, on Andreas Georgson, I think the real reason why he was signed was us struggling from set pieces, irrespective of us having big defenders. And I think Mikel wanted more specialized role for every aspect of the game, because he brought in a goalkeeping. What we brought in Inaki Kanya in December 2019, like a couple days after Mikel came in. He also came with Steve Round in December 2019, who worked with Mikel since he was a player at Everton. We also brought in Stevenberg, who's basically his number 2, and Stevenberg worked for many years with Louis van Gaal. We also have Carlos Cuesta, who we brought in, who's a very young coach. I think he's like 24, if I'm not mistaken, and he's worked in Atletico Madrid, and he worked there for many years. He also worked with Mikel at Manchester City, and he worked at Juventus. Mikel chose many specific coaches who had different levels of experience from all over the world, because that Georgson worked in Sweden with Malmo and then came to work in Brentford. We also had Stevenberg, who's worked in Holland and then worked at Manchester United. We also had Carlos Cuesta, who's worked in Spain and Italy. So we wanted to bring in different backgrounds to influence our players with the coaching.
I mean, for me, if you're talking about the one thing I have noticed is the set pieces. It's been a massive impact on our season. I mean, we've conceded a lot less chances. And when I talk about Arsenal on the pitch, there's a lot of organization on the pitch that wasn't there before. And so it doesn't surprise me to hear that there's been an organizational change and more organization from different people in the background, because that's shown on the pitch. So I'm not surprised about that at all. I mean, you can just look at, for example, yes, we've had a bad season injury-wise, but there's not been that fragility that has been in the past that I've felt that our players are not unfit, but not is an inability to perform at the same level for 90 minutes. And I know there's been a lot of physio and health changes at the club as well. I don't know. I think George knows a lot about that, so I'll let him go on that.
Well, really quickly, again, guys, this is what makes me so excited about the future. And when we talk about a plan, I want to see a how, and I want to see what is the process for improving these things. So on a physio side, across the league, what COVID has actually shown us and through the schedules, there's been an increase, I believe, about 30% in soft tissue injuries. This has not been the case with Arsenal. If you look at our record over COVID, we actually have one of the best, if not the best, injury history in the EPL flight. Now, when you look at specific changes, so Bruno Mazziotti, who is a current freelance coach, who I think everybody seemed to get quite excited for. There was a lot of social media buzz about him. He came from PSG, but I think what people really need to realize is he actually worked at Corinthians back in 2018, and that actually is how Edu has a link to Bruno. So Edu was actually previously director of football back at Corinthians, and so that's where the link in terms of a relationship began. But Bruno, the difference with Bruno is he right now is only a freelance physio that began his work in January. The real person that should be getting the plaudits is Jordan Rees. And now Jordan Rees was previously head of the academy physios, but he was promoted at the beginning of the season for the first team. And he is responsible for the change that we've seen really at the physio level. Bruno just came in January. And so this idea that Bruno is responsible for our injury-free season is quite poor, I believe, on the result of the media. I think it's them trying to miscue certain things. Jordan should be receiving the plaudits that he's done and the work and changes that he's done to implement. Bruno is an excellent staff, and it goes to, again, the changes at looking at a worldview and looking at impacts from different experiences. But the structure of our team and our physio was headed by Jordan Reese, and the output in our season is clear. And you can see that in our lack of injuries. So when you're looking at, oh my gosh, is our plan going to crap? Well, no. We've made the hires. He's provided the output, and we've added the little spice of experience that could maybe give us the edge with the Brunos. I think what you're seeing is a theme here, Curran, before we stop, because there's really not much, but you're seeing structure hires, and then you're seeing added experience at international level supplementing that. When you have international experience heading your department, it's always destined to fail. I see that with Sven, no matter how great he was. If you look at some of the hires, they weren't great. If you look at his idea with Stuttgart, he has the odd pearl of a gem, but the idea that he could head a major club or top 6 club wasn't true. So when we look at our structure, we are recruiting within the league, within Premier League, and we're adding slight experience that's international to supplement the philosophy, not the other way around. And that's why I believe our long-term success is in and secured.
Yeah, before you move on from the doctors, you forgot to mention, in my opinion, someone who also got promoted at the same time as Jordan Reese, with a Dr. Florence Newton.
Yeah.
She came into the Arsenal Academy in 2015 and was there for 5 years, and then last May, them two both got promoted from the academy to the first team, and you've seen it's evident the improvement we've had in our injury department.
Yeah, I mean, if you do, one thing I would also like to add about the injuries that we've had is a lot of our injuries have been impact injuries as well, which are not exactly, I wouldn't class that as a lack of fitness injury. They literally are one of it, like the Tierney versus Liverpool injury. They're impact injuries that occur on the field. And they're injuries that literally there's nothing you could really do about them. If the impact happens, the impact happens. So I don't know. I do like the things we've seen from on the fitness side, but I want to see how we do in a non-COVID season and see how we progress over time. So I think we'll leave that at that. I mean, does anyone have anything else they want to say about the coaching or the organization at the club?
No.
No. Okay, then we'll move on. Next thing I wanted to talk about was about the youth, as George liked to say. We were going to dive into it, so I think might as well dive into it. I mean, if you look at the changes at the club in the past year or so, the influx of youth in the team, what I wanted to know is, has it been done because it's something that was needed at the time and we just needed to fill a space? Or is it something that is more fundamental and a more cultural change, something that we actually want to be doing going forward?
Yeah, so I think the youth, why I love the youth, it's not just because I have a bias towards youth, but I think it's the clearest example of showing change, of showing outcome, and actually us being able to judge results. So back in 2018, everybody knows that Per Mertesacker was appointed as our head of youth development. Now, one of his first changes that he did was to make sure, along with the help of Nolan Partners, I might add, who helped in the hiring of Marcel Lucassen, but he wanted to bring him in from his experience with the German national team. And so what happened was a major shakeup at the academy level happened in 2018, where 8 staff members were given the sack. Among them was youth scouting Steve Morrow, who had been with the Arsenal setup for over 10 years. Now, this just gives you an example of the clear out that happened at that time. After that, what happened was Lee Heron, who was previously of Reading, led the new talent ID department, along with Steve Brown, who is head of coaching at MK Dons. These are 2 teams within the kind of Premier League structure who are well known for scouting and recruitment. They became the new face of the talent ID department. Working alongside Marcel Lucassen, the aim was that talent department would be able to identify and nurture talents from the age of under 9s to under 16s. And so what this did is it streamlined the approach to youth recruitment to very specific upgrades. And so when you structure recruitment at a very specific level, we see that revamp only last year when Per had clear planning in recruiting Muller, who is a target man striker, Rekic, who is a ball-dominant right center back, Salah Adin, who is a creative midfielder, George Lewis, who was a winger who we had a need for, Dinzehi, Akinola, and Adejo from Ajax. These are all players that represented holes in the first team and a clear planning approach. So when you look at a broad view, we now have the idea of how the structure resulted in a clear out, then a specific hire, and actually the output where we saw players being recruited. And I'm seeing this at the first team level now. I see a lot of people upset about the Kajigao sacking and everything, but this is following the same plan that Per laid out in the youth development. The only thing I want to add before we get other people involved is what was so special about Marcel Lucassen, who, by the way, has left for personal reasons, but the work he's done, I just want to get a little bit in detail about his philosophy and what he did to lay the foundation for us moving forward. So his philosophy really focused on several things, mainly identifying one. So when he arrived at Arsenal, no one really at the club could tell him what our way of playing was. And so collectively, what he worked on was to develop the way of Arsenal, which he called the philosophy that our under 9s to our under 23s would play to and set an example. On coaching basics, he employed 6 very basic principles that all coaches at the academy level would learn to implement. Starting the attack, creating an attack, and finishing it. And then as well, defending as high as possible, as quickly as possible, and then translating that into a transitional play. He also looked at the importance of experience. This led into the Ben Napier and loan manager signings. He also was a very big proponent of feedback and clear instructions. He mainly highlighted that while players will make mistakes, he wanted them to analyze the situation so that they would be asking, why did that mistake happen? This would help in thinking about the next step in the situation. And we see this evident in our footballing IQ in all of our Hale End graduates. That's one of the key core principles when you look at Emile Smith-Rowe, Bukayo Saka, Reece Nelson even, Joe Willock. They all have an appreciation for space and footballing IQ. And this isn't just, it's coincidence. They're a golden generation. These are principles that Marcel Lucassen has been highlighting for years, literally since 2018. On the importance of young players, the last thing I'll say is, why did he believe that young players were so essential to any club? So when you look at why are clubs on a world-class level for only a period in time, when we look at sustainability and long-term outcome, it's because there's a rebuilding phase every time a new coach comes in. So new players come in from other clubs and the players need time to settle in. But if you take youth players, for example, instead of looking at the expensive name signings and maybe they may make more mistakes. And, Wenger has always highlighted a youth player may be making mistakes, but they have the advantage of nonverbal communication. They have grown up with each other all these years. So when you have set up that way, they know how each other works. They know each other's pattern of play. And the rebuilding phase is very short. And their integration into men's football, but our team, is seamless. They now have a way of playing that they've grown up with. They grow up with each other. And you're looking at the connection between the two being a perfect marriage.
I mean, personally, I feel like it's much, as you said, it's much more sustainable. Not when you look at clubs, for example, like United after Ferguson, us after Wenger, Liverpool right now. There's always an injury drop off. There's a culture drop off, and there's an ability drop off outside when you get outside of that first team squad, and the ability to bring players in with the same philosophy that you have going from lower down is nothing but an asset. I don't know what you think, CK, but that's my main takeaway from it.
Yeah, I think it's probably beneficial if everybody throughout the club from the age of 9 to the age of 35 knows the way we play. And as they develop through the ranks, they're learning the same thing, and it becomes second nature to them. So eventually when they do come into the first team, their integration will take much less time. And another thing on us changing the youth first in 2018 when the Cronkies took over. Cronkies normally prioritize youth in every sports franchise. In every sports franchise they use. For example, the Denver Nuggets, who are probably one of the best
My
teams
team.
in their league, the best teams in the NBA right now, are like the third youngest team on average age in their league. The Colorado Avalanches, they're also the third youngest team in their league, and they're the second best team in their league. And the LA Rams, who won the Super Bowl a couple years, like 2 years ago, are now.
They lost the Super Bowl, but they got to the Super Bowl.
Oh yeah,
They lost the Super Bowl. They got to the Super Bowl. Yeah, they won the conference.
Yeah,
they lost to Brady.
And in like 2016, they were the youngest team. 2017, the third youngest team. 2018, the fourth youngest team. 2019, the fifth youngest team. And 2020, they were the second youngest team. So that shows how much the Conkeys prioritize youth when they want to drastically change or improve their franchise, which is why the Conkeys chose to prioritize and change our youth with Marcel Lucassen and Per first in 2018.
What it does, really quickly, is it sets the foundation for success. And what we are actually seeing right now is we are seeing a plan. So I'm not just talking about the ether. I always cite specific hires, I cite output, and I cite a comparison to see, does it work in other leagues? What we are seeing right now is the myriad in different sporting franchises, and that is why success is very easy to predict. It's why we have seen these plans realized. Now, listen, I'm not saying everything is perfect and everything that they've done is perfect. No. But when you see a structure and a plan of prioritizing youth, prioritizing hires to a plan, you see success.
I mean, I don't know what you think about the current youth development staff. So you haven't. I'd just like to get your opinion on what we've done with the staff on the youth level.
Well, I think I kind of talked about it really quickly with our hires of Lee Heron and our hires of Steve Brown from MK Dons. These are fundamental changing pieces that have been ahead of youth recruitment for absolutely years. And they're responsible for really the hires that we're seeing throughout younger than the under 23s, really, because it's not coincidence that we're seeing all of these new players coming in. There's a recent Chelsea grad who I think Z knows about that is going to be a star. That has recently transferred to Arsenal, and he is a fan. But the idea that we're recruiting within the league and abroad to excellent profile, yes, it's amazing. It is the predictor for success. So I do believe, though, I think somebody will tell me, but George, the under 23s are last in their league. How can you sit there and say our youth is so amazing? Well, really quite simply. Steve Bold has struggled. He has. He's not a coach that I believe that we will see there for very long. But also, what I will say is we have gutted that U23 squad for our first team. Okay, this idea that you can just correlate results to a coach, I struggle with. He is a bad coach. Let me get that wrong, or right rather. But the idea that we have not added. Players to it is a little bit strange. We've lost Bukayo Saka, Joe, tons of players key to that structure.
We were bringing Balogun up and down.
Balogun.
There were even at times Steve Bold with his lineups was playing 5 attackers. In a 4-3-3, and he's a cause for some failure down there, but it's not all his fault.
I mean,
to be fair, the biggest issue is there's been players like Migo Aziz, Charlie Patino, even Kiddo, Taylor Harp, and Balogun. They've not been, told where they stand within the Arsenal also standings, whether it's the under 23s, the under 18s, and however you want to put it. So I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons why, the Arsenal youth players have struggled. One thing I heard was that the under 23s, they didn't really have much time to train with each other before a youth game, and they used to play with the first team, train with the first team actually. And so when it came to the game day, they were lost for words really. So that was one of the biggest issues, and I think we can see it. We've seen it with the results. We've tried to nick results here and there, but there's been a loss of pattern of play. There's the understanding between the players is a bit missing nowadays. So I think from next season, we Per Mertesacker has to sign some players that will strictly only play with the under 23s and only train with the under 23s, and have under 18s that will only train with the under 18s, so that we have a league standing on check, because last thing you want is our under 23s to be relegated.
I mean A1, let me just get you in here, because I just want your opinion on the Per Mertesacker, Mikel Arteta axis, and your thoughts on how that's progressing.
Personally, I think that's one of the most positive things about the club right now. I think with Arteta's a separate subject. It's very divisive.
It's divisive.
We've got. I'm pretty sure we all have the same opinion on Arteta, but as a whole fan base point of view, it's completely different. But I think Per Mertesacker right now, I think he's doing an amazing job. Honestly, I think the way he's from academy level to under 18s to under 23s, it's a clear structure, a clear pathway, and that's what he's trying to do more than anyone else right now, is trying to give these youngsters a pathway to the first team, or if most of them can't make it, a pathway elsewhere, which is making a functional system right now. Because before, with our youth development and stuff, I think it was it Lucasen, I think, that came in, and said, look, the structure's a mess, like it's awful, like, and he started to heal the gaps that were there from previous regimes, and obviously Per's taken over and he's done his thing.
Smashed
it. So I think you guys were touching on I think Zed was talking about how there's an issue between where each player stands with like the under 18s or the under 23s of the first team. I think that's also a consequence of these players are way better than we actually thought they were. If that makes sense. Because for example,
it does. It makes complete sense.
Because when we brought in Gabriel Martinelli, he was supposed to be at the under 23s for the whole year. He was so good in pre-season, he got fast-tracked straight away. And I think that's what's happening with other players now. Because, for example, Kido is now training with the first team on a regular basis, and I think he's just turned 18.
Just turned 18, and he was a key fixture for the under 23s now, banging in goals, and we fast-tracked him.
With Kido's development, he was actually due to be released last season. So for us to see where we are now, where he's as done as his contract, it's very surprising, because it's hard for us as fans to see how they measure these players, and how do they look at the development. Because for us to say, we were gonna release Kiddo Taylor Hart last season, and now we're begging for him to sign a contract, it's baffling to me. Like, what are these massively paid coaches there for? That us fans can see, but they can't. So I don't know. It's a struggle.
I'll speak on Keto really, really quickly. I think everybody on Twitter knows. Everybody on Twitter, they all know he is my favorite youth prospect, and I'll touch on maybe the reason from a youth development aspect, because that's one of my passion projects. So when I look at youth players, I need to pair the physicality as well as the technical ability, because I think at youth level, what you're going to see between spurts and physical growth spurts, you see two sides. You either see a player too technically good that he doesn't need to rely on much else, just he's good enough to beat everybody, or you have somebody who's too strong and too powerful that they don't work on their technical skills, and you have lacks in their technical game. Keto was a sufferer of somebody who was actually quite wiry, very short. He was clear technical ability wise. That's always been the case, but he never had an ability to influence games because he physically wasn't a standout. And so what happened in the last year, he shot up to over 6 foot.
He's massive now. He's became my size now.
Yeah, and he became a man. And so what you now have, though, from a coaching perspective, is we always saw the feet. We always saw the technical ability. It was clear. But we've got a 6 foot person right now. So when you're starting to project and you're starting to say, okay, can he integrate into a men's football? That's a scary prospect, guys, when you have the feet and the quickness of Reece Nelson, an ambipedal player who's 6 foot. It's a wrap in terms of what your potential could be. But it just goes to show, though, that's maybe the calculus that a youth coach or a scout, that's at least something I make as somebody who's just on Twitter, looking at these players and whether or not they can integrate well. I'll save anything else on Keto for my own uses a little bit later, and until hopefully we get some good information.
We'll get into him.
But that's I guess my overarching view on like how does somebody scout or project a youth player.
Yeah. To be fair,
there's been a lot of
one of my biggest reservations with the whole scouting as well with our youth players is just the judgment of where they see these players develop in the future and how they see them develop, and giving them a set position. For example, we have players like Joel Willock, we had players like Ainsley Maitland-Niles, where they still don't know their best positions, and that could be maybe due to the versatility, but the fact is, when they were in their youths, they were not given a set position. They were playing on the wing, they were playing in the middle, they were tested left, right, centre. They should ideally, what should have been done is they should have been given a set position, that's specified to their qualities, their attributes, and that should have been, how they move up to the first team ranks. But because now we are so stuck with a few youth players that we don't know where we see them within the team, and it's kind of sad as well.
I mean, we've done a lot of personally, we've said a lot of positives about the club at the moment, but I want to get onto something a bit more controversial, which is where the change is needed. Where are we going to go? And I'll go around everyone and we'll have a go at it. But I want to know from someone who personally, I'm looking outside. I'm very new to this. What are the changes and the things that you want to see from the club structurally or personnel wise that you want changed in the short term and the long term? And I don't know who wants to start, but if I'll let George start.
Yeah, I'm going to be really quick because I think I've talked a lot about the internal structures over this podcast and what I believe for the future. What I fundamentally am seeing right now is I just see change. I see us in a churn of development right now, and I urge patience because I see a plan and I see a structure, because I again look at the youth setup and what we saw from 2018 to now to project what we're going to see with the first team. And I'm just going to highlight, we've talked about it, there was a clearance of the old guard, right? Mm-hmm. We then recruited specific profiles. We then saw specific talent ID to those profiles, and we are now seeing the outcome of a churn of Hale and graduates, not just at under 23s, but at U18s and even scholars, by the way, because I haven't even talked about those, but we have an influx of seriously talented scholars that are coming through. And that is the plan. That is when you ask me, am I okay for the future? I see it because we've done it since there. And I see that in the first team very easily happening.
A1?
Sorry, bro, you're on mute.
Yeah. Just saying, I think maybe Richard Garlick might provide that, but I think a bit more experience. I think right now, if you're looking at the board right now, you're looking at Vinay, Edu, Arteta. That's three very, very inexperienced people at the top who for such a big job like this is a generation style rebuild job that he has that we have right now. So it's not easy for anyone. Never mind someone who's not had as much experience at club level. I know Edu's done stuff internationally with Brazil, but not at club level. So, and if you're being really honest right now, this window specifically, there is almost zero margin for error right now. Because if we mess it up again,
that's 5 years.
We are in big trouble.
Big
trouble, because I'm looking at Manchester City. We all know.
Yeah.
They are. Chelsea, they're gonna go again and spend money. They've already got a stacked squad, in my opinion, full of a lot of quality. They're missing some areas, which is not much. I think Man United are 2 signings away from potentially contending for the title. I think Liverpool are Liverpool. They will be back with like Van Dijk and whatnot. They will be back. So for us to even come near them, we have to have a flawless window. We're gonna have to make some quick decisions, and we're gonna have to be proactive in who we get rid of and bring in. So it's a massive job. So that's why I'm saying experience is a bit lacking right now. But who knows?
Would you want to see more experience on the recruitment side, or where do you think the experience is needed right now?
Not necessarily recruitment, because I think they know what they want. I think identifying players is not, for these people, it's not that hard. Like they've been in the game for a long time.
Okay.
And they got their scouts and whatnot. I think it's more so closing deals, because I think that's not easy. Negotiating with teams that, for example, don't need the money. Some teams, like for example, if you're gonna, let's say hypothetically, as unlikely as it may be, someone like Jack Grealish.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to be very, very good at negotiating that deal, because they don't need the money, and the player probably is not gonna force them to move out. So that's what I'm saying. We need, and even with like say, a lot of theories are put out why award didn't happen last summer. That deal didn't get closed. Whatever happened, it didn't get closed.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. With the Gabriel, that lingered on for a long time.
Yeah, I remember.
3 weeks extra. That deal went from close to nothing happening till maybe PSG might come in, and then we got it done. So that's what.
To be fair with you, mate. Last transfer window, when Raul left, because Fahmy was on gardening leave, it was a mess. It was all on Mikel and Edu to wrap up the Gabriel deal and try and sort out Hussam Aouar and Thomas Partey. Ultimately, they got us Thomas Partey. Probably because it was an easier transaction, and they've messed up with Hussam Aouar. But now we have 2 more people in place with Tim Lewis and Richard Garlick. Richard Garlick is very, very good with the job, as far as I'm aware. And he could help us with the negotiation side, which you may be worried about. So I think we're in a good stead. It's just about whether our targets that we want and our targets that we're looking at, are they feasible to get? How quick are we going to get all these deals completed, and are we going to get them before the pre-season? These things are the main things that we need to worry about. And you're right, there's little to no chance of error for this summer. I agree with that. I think we could set ourselves back many, many years if we mess up this summer. I agree.
I mean, if you just quickly, A1, what would you? How you were mentioning the Gabriel deal last summer? I mean, has there been a major transformation with the dealings, with transfer dealings in the last couple of windows that have changed obviously from under Raul to Edu, and how do you have any insight on how that's changed and what's been going on recently?
You're muted.
I don't know if anything big has changed right now, but I think in terms of structurally, they know what they were missing last year. They know there were problems, and we heard enough issues and what was supposed to happen and what didn't happen in the end. So, but I think right now it's a mystery. We won't know until we see it.
Till we see it, yeah.
Yeah, so because right now it's too hard to tell, because right now everything's extremely secretive as well.
I mean, the other thing I would like to ask everyone is, is there things that you've seen under Edu that you weren't seeing under Raul, or is there things that Raul has done that have been bad habits that Edu is continuing, or how does anyone have any input on that?
Raul's.
I don't think we can.
Oh yeah.
I don't think we can judge him on that. No, I'm sorry. I just want to say, I don't think we can judge Edu because I had a window where it's his. He's had to pick up on Raul's mess, so we have to judge him based on this window. But as far as I'm aware, the owners aren't happy with how Edu has, he dealt with the Williams signing, with the whole signing in the home of Kia. Apparently, it didn't feel right to them. It should have been done in a Highbury house and all these stuff. So there is a question of, there's a conflict of interest there, really. So that's something that we might need to take into consideration. But as far as we're aware with Edu transfers, he's not been given a chance really. So we need to see how it fares. I don't know what you think, A1.
No, another thing as well. I think Edu got a lot of criticism last summer. A lot with what happened. Me personally, I didn't criticize as much as other people because it's a COVID market. No one managed to sell anyone. No one. Not even teams that are notorious for selling dead wood for a lot of money. Teams like Liverpool, Chelsea, etc. They didn't sell anyone. I think buying from clubs in the league is impossible, and buying from outside, it's not easy when the club finances are dropping and the market state is in a complete mess. So I allowed him for that window, but for this window,
it's very crucial.
I can't emphasize this enough. If we mess this up,
we did, for sure.
We're finished.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, last window, it was harder to associate blame to Edu because for me he had to deal with the failures of other people, and we didn't really know to the extent what Vinay actually does. So if you don't know exactly what Vinay does and you blame Edu for every single thing, Vinay gets away with potentially doing nothing or doing something. So that's why I didn't necessarily blame Edu. And this summer is the biggest summer we've had in a very long time, because
very, very long time.
Even make or break for Arsenal, because this summer, if we actually do very well this summer, we could put ourselves in a position to actually take more steps, because it's looking like we won't have Europe. So we'll only have the league to focus on. So we'll have less games than the other teams who we should be around. And if we do improve, we could have a better chance of actually getting back into top four.
I mean, for me, it's a situation where obviously we know the importance of the window, but I think the main thing is with this window is don't go for big names, go for profiles. Make sure you actually recruit players that are in the window for our rebuild. So don't just go for, a 29-year-old just because he fits the profile, when in realistic terms, we're looking at a league and a Champions League within the next 3 to 5 years. And I want a team where the team grows together and they grow into they peak at the right time, because the club is going to be working on a window. So as we mentioned earlier, you can sustain the success by bringing through youth at the same point, but you need the ability to have a first team that can repair the injuries that have been done in these past 5 years. So recruiting a bunch of 27, 28-year-olds right now, I think is pointless. I think we should be looking at a profile maybe between 21 and 24 and making sure that we have the correct profiles for the squad. I mean, we're going to get into transfers in a different episode, but that's just quickly what my thoughts on it.
I think, look, Edu, I think everybody knows my opinion on Edu. I'm a little bit passive. I don't fault him for last summer. What I do fault him is this January in not securing a backup left back, but that could have been made from up top, and I don't know. So all eyes will be on Edu in terms of his performance and evaluation. I look at the team, and you guys are right. Everybody here has highlighted how important this summer is for Arsenal Football Club to close the gap between the top 6 teams. And that is a huge job. I think what I always look at structure, I always look at plan, and I look at last summer to see the profile recruitment and the IDs that we're seeing. And I'm very encouraged by the IDs of our links. Our strongest links right now are addressing our most key areas. And so if you're going to be pessimistic, I think on the optimistic side, you need to look at this plan. And I'm seeing that in action right now. So I'm encouraged. Ultimately, though, just like with Mikel, no matter how much I believe in him, output rules in football, and we have to see those completion of those deals, just like we need to see Mikel rack up our position up in the table. No matter how much I believe in the plan and the structure, I think the output now needs to follow, and we're on our path to do so.
I mean, I think we need to start thinking about getting onto a point where we're getting to a situation that is more streamlined in terms of academy to first team. So therefore we should be getting people that fit the profiles, but are keeping it to the same, we're keeping it streamlined, as it were. I don't know if that's getting across properly, but keeping it, not going for huge names, but going for appropriate names.
Mate, the only tag on I would say is I think we have seen, and this is the whole point of the episode I did want to get across, where from youth and from 2018, and we're looking at our progress of our back room. If I had to summarize this episode just for myself, what you are seeing is the clearance of the old guard, a streamlined hiring approach. You're seeing an emphasis on local talent and an emphasis on sprinkling that with international experience. We are seeing that. We've seen it in Mikel's hires. We've seen it with the youth hires. We just need to see the output and results right now. And that is why I am very comfortable in the long-term future of the club, because we actually see it in a likely a cohort study with the youth. We've seen that project out, and we actually see the success. So let's just wait and let's see what happens this summer.
I'd like to go around with everyone and just give some final thoughts as well. So, A1, I'll start with you. I mean, what would you like? You're the main message to get across from the podcast. What would you like it to be?
I think there's, like George said, there's pieces in place now which haven't been there for many, many years. Because I think I'm looking at, let's say, not maybe the previous regime, they tried to get, like the Gazidis, I think, when Arsene Wenger left, they tried to get every single person that's towards the top of their field. You know, looking at Raul, he's known for doing all of these deals at Barcelona. Mislintat, he's supposed to be the diamond eye, although I don't think he did a very good job at all, personally. I think he absolutely messed up. And then, look, he's all these people who are supposed to be big in their fields, but they didn't coexist.
No.
They didn't coexist. Now, he's brought in people who have got expertise, but in different fields to cooperate together, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping there's pieces there now. So I'm just hoping we can get some output now because, yeah, it's been a long time. And also one thing, I think there's a lot of talk of should Arteta be in charge of management. If he should be in charge of the signings. My counteracting point is that to play the style of football we want to, we need the top quality players.
Yeah.
And those profiles for any manager would fit anywhere, in my opinion. So,
agreed. Very much agreed.
A player like Thomas Partey, any manager would love to have Thomas Partey.
Yeah.
Gabriel, he will be a world-class centre-half, in my opinion. 2-3 years down the line, with his from a defending aspect. I think on the ball he needs to improve a lot more, but that'll come. And then you've got, let's say we bought Husamawa. Which club is not going to want to use Husamawa?
Exactly.
Yeah, so for me, I think trust this guy with the signings, in my opinion, because I think they will be of a top quality to play the football that we want to, and he knows the standard. He was at Man City. He was there. He knows what it takes to get to the top. So I'm just saying, I just hope we go with what he says and then follows it up.
Yeah, the only add-on I would make to A1's right there is all my philosophy, and I've said it before when I talk about targets, they need to have a couple things in mind for me. They need to be versatile in their formations. So when I talk about your Sumares, your Rydal Bakus, when I talk about Husam Awars, they are excellent world-class players, but they are not limited to a formation. The other thing that they all have in common is they are ball-carrying progressors and presences in all thirds of the pitch, every single one of them. And the last thing is they are elite at the first 5-yard burst, I call it. This is important in looking at the two-way transition nature. So those three combinations, when you combine that with what A1 is saying, it means that any coach will love to have these players and can utilize them in any formation. So you're not limited to an Arteta style of play, even though they fit it perfectly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, CK, have you got any final thoughts?
Basically, I agree with what they've said, and I wanted to. We streamlined our hierarchy, especially in the youth. We streamlined it to create a pathway, and I think we should streamline our squad in the same way we streamlined our youth and analysts and stuff like that, because we have a very, very bloated squad, which would make it hard for any manager to come in and make the right choices or play the right players, because you have to try and make everybody happy. So if we streamline our squad the same way we streamlined above, I think we'll see big changes in the very near future.
And Z, finally, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I mean, to be fair, now we have no excuses. We've got everything in place. We've got Richard Garlick in place. We've got Tim Lewis in place. We've got Edu and Mikel Arteta after 1 year. They've got a bit more experience, so that's also in place. We've spoken to quite a few of the senior players, and some of them, have already told the club that, put me up for sale. So there's quite a lot of movement going. So I frankly, if we do see any hiccups in the transfer window, it's inexcusable. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, we have a very, very good window, and because everything's in place, to be fair, now it's now never. I'm sure all of you guys agree.
Yep, very much so. And on that note, I think we'll wrap it up. It's been great having everyone on. Thanks for everyone for coming on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm sorry for any problems I've given.
Yeah, we're all getting used to it. It's the beginning of a new channel. Don't worry about it, mate. We're all getting. We're all learning on the job. So hope everyone enjoyed it. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers, lads. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.